Hi there guys, welcome back to JoanMedia. In this video we are going to learn how to use the request method in order to delete, post and update for example an endpoint. In this case I have this application which is a to-dos application, right? A very simple one. And well, we have this information, right? We have in this particular case two to-dos in the to-do list, right? And this, as you can see here, well, this data is being consumed by, or actually is consuming the endpoint to-dos over here. This is the data that in this application is well consuming, as I'm telling you, right? So I'm gonna make sure that this API or endpoint, right, we can post, delete, for example, the number 2, the to-do number 2. If I enter here the number 2, you will see that we can access that particular resource, and we can also post one. Why I'm telling you this? For example, if I come here and I enter a new to-do, it is gonna be updated in the endpoint. Let me show you to-dos. We have created a new object here with the information that well, the application needs. So actually it is sending the data to the backend in this way, right? So for example, if I come here and then update this test tree to do, you will see that the endpoint is gonna be changed. Let me see why it didn't work. I'm gonna come here and take a look of the to-dos. You can see that the completed key was changed from false to true, right? So it is very interesting. I really think that this is very interesting and something that you must know. So please watch it until the end, because it's gonna be a very interesting video and you will learn a lot of things from here. So let's go ahead and go to my Cypress project. As you can see here, I have created a new spec.js file. In this case, I have created a constant name endpoint, right? Which is that to-dos endpoint that I was showing you before, which is this one, right? That's good. So I don't know why it didn't refresh. Now it is refreshed. That's good. Well, I also have created a new to-do object, as you can see here, and well, it has the syntax that the endpoint is actually expecting, right? Because if I come here to the endpoint and look for the syntax, well, the data has the object notation and it should have a title, or actually it should has a title, the completed key and the ID, right? So I'm creating this object in my project here, and it has the same let's say schema, right? The title, the completed and the ID. So I want to post this to-do object from my Cypress project and make sure that it was it was posted as expected. So what I'm gonna do here is a very simple function. Okay, I'm gonna make a constant here named @todo. That's good, right? I'm sorry. In this case, this function is gonna be expecting an item or @todo, for example, right? And a to-do object to make this very clear, right? And this function, well, is gonna be retrieving or returning something here, which is gonna be the CY.REQUEST. We're gonna be sending the get, or actually, I'm sorry, the post method. And once this was done, well, then I'm gonna send the information to the endpoint itself. All right, we are sending. We are not yet sending, because I need another parameter here, which is the to-do object. So I'm gonna try to explain you what is happening here. What I'm gonna do is post to the endpoint, which is a localhost in this case, right? And /todos. This is the particular actually endpoint itself. We are gonna be sending the to-do object to the endpoint, right? Using the post method. And you might be wondering why. This is something that I probably should show you before, but if I inspect this application here, and if I look for it, and actually I enter, right, a new to-do, and I come to the network, well, tab here in the Chrome, and if I send a new to-do over here, you will see that I have something here, right, which is a request. In this request, we are using the method post in order to send the object. In this case, as you remember, it was the test number 3, and it has the false value for the key completed. It has generated a complete random ID, right? But that's the way that it is sending the data to the endpoint in the backend. So we're gonna be trying to actually update the endpoint using Cypress. So we're gonna be using Cypress here, and this is the method that we are going to use: CY or CY.REQUEST, using the post method, specifying the endpoint over here, and then sending the to-do object that I want to post in the endpoint itself. So I'm gonna make sure that it works correctly. I'm gonna create a describe. It is gonna be named, for example, API testing demo again. And inside of that describe, I'm gonna create a simple it, right? And this it is gonna be named, for example, add a to-do. Once this was done correctly, I'm gonna use the method that I have created before, add to do, over here. I'm gonna come here, I'm gonna name or actually call the add to do method, and this method is actually expecting a to do object, right? And I'm gonna use simply the constant object that I have created before in this case. And there it is. Now the add to do should be requesting to the endpoint to be posting that to do object that I'm sending in the request. I know that it sounds a bit tricky, but if you practice this, it's gonna be pretty easy, right? Once I have done this, I'm gonna make sure that the request was done correctly. And you might be wondering how. Well, I'm gonna make a get method here, and I'm gonna actually request a get response. And I'm gonna be consulting the endpoint itself to make sure that the to-do object was posted correctly. How I can do this? Well, I'm gonna use I'm gonna call the endpoint here, okay? And using the slash, I'm gonna call the ID of the object that I have posted, all right? How I can do that? Well, basically using the to-do object over here, to-do object, that, and I'm gonna be entering or actually accessing the ID property here using the .id. Now, as you can imagine in your mind, it is gonna be doing something like this. Let me show you. As you can see in the endpoint, I'm gonna go to the to-do's endpoint. It has an ID. In case that I want to visit a particular resource here, I just have to specify in the path the ID that it has. So as you can see here, if I enter the number 1, it is retrieving us the test object with the ID number 1. In case that I actually look for the number 2, it is actually retrieving only the data for that particular object. So I want to make sure that using that get, we have in the body, right, using the its function that we have saw in the last video, we're gonna be looking for the body key in the yielded object, right? And once this was done, I want to make sure with an assertion sheet that it is deep equal to the to-do object that I have in the project here, right? So let me try to explain you again what is happening here. What is happening here, is we're getting the particular object inside of the endpoint that we have created just before with this method, and we're making sure that this exists in the endpoint visiting the ID that it has. In this case is the number 3, right? Once this was done, we're gonna be looking for the body response, and we're gonna make sure that it has the same data and schema that this object that we have in our project. I hope that it is kind of understandable. If not, please let me know in the comment. It's kind of tricky, but you will see the results in a few seconds. Okay, I'm gonna come here. The test runner is working, so I'm gonna come and execute my API request.spec.js file. Let's do it. And as you can see, it has executed this particular right? It has done the request, the post request, As you can see, it has returned a 201 status message. Okay, if I inspect the console here, you will see that probably let me see what is happening here. Let me open up this. You can see that the yielded object that we have in the console, it has actually the body that we have sent. It has the ID number 3. It has the title new to do from post, and it has the completed false, right? That particular key. Why? Because, well, that's how we specify this in the project over here, right? Let me show you. As you can see, the completed key was set to false, right? And once this was done, well, it retrieved us, or actually it responded with the status 201, which is the correct or the created resource status from the HTTP method, right? And once this was done before, or actually successfully, I'm sorry, well, I'm requesting to the to this particular ID of the endpoint, right? And we're making sure that it has the correct body and the schema. So if I come here to the to this particular UI, I'm gonna actually take a look of the UI. You can see that I have a new to do from post in the UI, right? That's correctly. And if I actually come here and look for the endpoint, we have three different objects. And if I look for the number 3, as I'm doing in Cypress, I have the body that I want to make sure that has or actually was created, the number 3. In case that the posts were not done correctly, we're gonna have an assertion error here, right? And that's how we can make sure, for example, that post was done correctly or not in an API. Just an example, right? There are a lot of possibilities and stuff. So let's go ahead and try to do something else. I'm gonna be updating. All right, I'm gonna just come here and I want to delete this new to do from post. Okay, I'm gonna close the test runner because I don't want to execute anymore this for now. And I have done something wrong here. Let me just I have done something wrong. I'm gonna execute again my script because I want that new to do be part of the UI here, right there. So I'm gonna make an update. Okay, I'm gonna click on this button here, and as you can think about it, well, we're gonna have something, right? It is gonna be or actually this text is gonna have a line in front of it, right? As you can see here, I'm gonna open up the inspect and I'll look for the network. And if I click there, you will see that we have a new interaction with the API. And if I inspect this in the headers, you can see that the request method that we have is a patch. Okay, so as you can see, well, it is retrieving the status code 200. Okay, and well, the request URL method that we are visiting in this case is the todo's endpoint with the particular ID number 3. Right, that's how the patch method is doing the change. And as you can see in the response, well, the change is that the completed key has now the value of true. Before it was set to false. Please remember, if I come here in the project, you can see that by default it was set well in false way, right? Yeah. So I'm gonna try to do this with Cypress, all right? And you might be wondering how. It is pretty easy. Let me show you. I'm gonna create another object here. It is gonna be named patch object. Okay. Let me show you. It is gonna be patch object. It is gonna have the same ID. In this case, it's gonna be the number 3. And the only change that I want to make sure that happen is that the completed key is gonna be set to true when I perform a patch HTTP method. Okay, so I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna create a new it. Okay, let me check if I have deleted the to do from the list successfully, and it's good. And what I'm gonna do here is, well, make a new it, and I'm gonna call this and think about it, for example, update add to do. Okay, In this case, we are gonna also be needing a new constant here, a new method. It's gonna be named, for example, update to do. That's good. And this particular method, well, it is gonna be receiving the to do object. In this case, it is not gonna receive the to do object. It's gonna be receiving the patch object. Okay. Let me see, patch object, and well, we are gonna be doing some stuff with this data, right? And inside of here, well, what I have to do is use the CY.REQUEST method again, right? And instead of using post, we have to use the HTTP method patch. And once I have done this, well, what I want to do here, well, is visit the endpoint that I have declared before, right? Endpoint. We have to visit specifically the item ID, or actually, let me show you with this in this way, the patch object that ID property in order to do a patch thing, right? If you remember correctly, in the console, we saw that it was visiting the to-do's endpoint, and in this case, it has to, well, go to the ID object that I have created before in order to update this stuff, right? So once this was done correctly, well, I think that I have to send also the change. In this case, I am sending the patch object that I have created before with the change in the completed key. All right. So once I have declared and have this method ready to be executed in Cypress, well, what I have to do is make the same stuff. Update to do. We have to send the patch object that I have created before, and then I want to make sure that well, the request patch was done correctly. And it's gonna be kind of the same thing that we have done before. We're gonna be using the same syntax here. I'm sorry, but instead of using a to do object, I'm gonna be using the patch object, right? But I'm gonna make sure that it has the patch object data and schema once the update was done. As you can see, I am actually making sure that it is deep equal to patch object, which has the change from false to true. All right, have that in mind. So I'm gonna come here in Cypress and I'm gonna execute again my script, API requests. And as you can see, well, the add to do method was performed correctly. As you can see, actually, if I inspect the console, probably the request was done correctly. And as you can see here in the yielded object, well, the body has a new to do here with ID number 3, and the completed key was set to false. However, after I perform a patch in the update add to do method, right? If I come here and look for the console, you will see that the request actually performed a change in the yielded object. It has the status 200, which is an OK status, right? And as you can see in the body, well, it has been changed from false to true in the completed key. And probably if I reload my UI over here, I'm sorry, I have opened without a reason Photoshop. If I refresh this website, you can see that well, I have now a new to do here, and well, actually this has a checked over here. I'm sorry, and it is working as expected, right? We are doing all these changes in the backend. Make that have that in mind, and we are doing this in the endpoint using the request method, right? Modifying this structure using request. That's very interesting, right? So let's imagine that I also now want to delete a new to do using the API too. All right, so let's go ahead and inspect this website, and I'm gonna come to the network tab over here, and I'm gonna delete this to do. All right, I'm sorry, I have moved this, if I come here and I click on the delete button, you will see that now I have a new request over here, and it has the name number 3. And as you can see, well, what I'm doing here is using the delete method, and and that's it. And we're gonna do this using the request method itself. We're gonna be performing this kind of stuff using the request method and interacting with the endpoint. So let me just close the test runner because I don't want to make any change by now. And we are gonna be creating a new test case here. It is gonna be called, for example, delete add to do. Okay, and also I of course need another method over here. It is gonna be called constant delete to do. Okay, it is not, or actually, yeah, it is gonna be receiving the object that I want to delete. Entonces, so for example, I can call this object to be deleted. All right, that's the parameter that I want to be waiting. And inside of here, in this function, well, I'm gonna be using this CY.REQUEST method again, and well, just have to look for the endpoint that I want to, for the endpoint and the resource that I want to delete. In this case, I'm gonna be using, well, the endpoint over here. But to be specific, I need to look for the object to be deleted, right? And look the ID of it in order to delete only one object, the one that I want. In this case, if I come to the it and I come here and call delete to do, well, in this case, I'm gonna be sending the object that I want to delete. I can either send the to do object or the patch object. Both of them have the ID number 3, right? So let's say that I want to delete the to do object over here. I'm sorry. And now, well, I want to make sure that the delete was done correctly in the backend, right? You might be wondering how. Well, let's do a new CY.REQUEST method. And inside of it, I'm gonna be, well, as always, looking for the get method. We're gonna retrieve the response, and we're gonna capture that in this method. And once this was done before, well, I want to look for the endpoint, right? And make sure using the its method over here and looking for the body in the yielded object in order to make sure that it should have length of 2 objects, right? Because if you remember correctly, the application is coming with 2 objects, right? 2 to-dos. We are posting one of them in order to test that we can add one and we can update that one, right? And now after I delete the request, I want to make sure that, well, the body from the request in the endpoint only have an object of 2 elements, right? So if I come here and I execute this this script, you will see that probably the API testing is working correctly. It is adding a to-do, it is updating a to-do correctly, and was one I don't want to have the to-do anymore, right? If I come here and look for the to-do, you will see that as soon as I send the delete method, right, and I look for the to-do number, let me take a look, the number 3, well, well, the body is set to nothing, right? It is retrieving us, or actually responding us with the status code 200, which is okay. And well, the resource was deleted from the endpoint as expected. And that's something that I wanted to show you, right? I think that this kind of video can help you to understand in better way how to use the request method. And I hope that it kind of help you to have a better overview of how to use this. So thank you very much for watching the video. I know that it was a bit tricky, but thank you if you come actually watch the whole video and you understand everything. If you have any kind of doubt, please let me know in the comment section below, and I'll try to help you as much as I can. Thank you very much, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.